Hello! We were just having a brief discussion about Squirmy and Grubs, a group that Jen really...
It's not a group.
Well, whatever they are.
Okay, Squirmy and Grubs is a YouTube show, and it's Shane and Hannah Burkaw, and I love them. And I've sent not an email, but they read their comments on their shows.
Towards them.
I do. I've been watching them for a couple of years, and I really, really want to talk to them about anything that they really want to talk about regarding disability and accommodation and, accessibility and stuff like that. And they're just really cool. I really like that.
They're not as cool as Bruce.
Like if you were able to get like Squirmy and Grubs to show up at like a birthday for me, that would be I'd be so excited.
Well, I will do the best I can.
Even maybe more than Nina excited.
Well, your ascension has been in part because of wonderful people along the way who were there for us in the early stages. My good friend Jordan Cheriton over at Status Quo was actually the first person to interview Jen when she ran for Congress in 2020. Followed up by, got to give a shout out to the lady's name slipping me, the one in Pennsylvania.
I have no idea what you're talking about. But I will also say this about Jordan. Jordan's a catalyst in the other way, because do you remember when you and I sort of got reconnected after the campaign?
Yeah.
I was watching Jordan's show. I was watching Jordan's live stream, and you were sitting on it with him.
Oh, yeah.
And I messaged you, and I'm like, what are you doing on with Jordan? Like, it was funny. And that's when you and I started talking more, like, connected. Yeah.
And
so it all comes back to Jordan.
As you could say that there are wonderful people that helped along the way. One of those people also was a lady by the name of Zana Perez, who had a huge hand in allowing Jen to meet people with various groups that could potentially help endorse and give more name recognition and help along the way. And the person, more than anyone else, who provided that helping hand with Brand New Congress is Zana Day, who we are obviously very pleased to welcome to Generational Change for the first time, and definitely not the last time.
What are you talking about for the first time?
I don't think she's ever been on the podcast.
Zana's been on.
That's right. Yes.
No, I think Zana's been on twice. Bring her on. Bring her on. She's been on here a couple times, please.
We won't.
Three times. She says 3 times. I knew twice. Twice she's been on the show. Seriously.
Zana, welcome back to Generational Change.
Hey, guys.
I think you're muted.
You're muted.
Oh.
Please hold.
Is it not her?
Is it working now?
I reinitiated the speakers when we redid the thing.
Yeah, I don't think there should be any issue as far as that's concerned.
Well, were we getting sound since we did it? Let me just look at something. Let me look at something. Hang on 1 second. Hold on 1 second. I know they can all hear us, but we need to go into... This is like not something I should necessarily be doing. We need to go into the settings. And I did it the other day. I don't remember how I got there necessarily, but there it is. But we need to figure out why our speakers aren't working.
Our speakers are not working?
Well, the speakers are working, but it's not sending it to the right place. And I can't remember how I got to that.
Oh, Lord.
It's always something here.
Yeah.
It's always
we're tech
illiterate
to some
I
degree,
think that should be settings, and it's not. And I don't know how to get to wherever that is.
Why was it? Well,
here, does this get me to that?
I don't know. This is all new to me.
All right, so
we went through the recycling of these systems because we were having problems the other day. All right, so let me see if there.
Right. All right.
Sound.
Yeah.
Output.
Speakers. Yeah.
Which speakers?
Is it that? Or is it that one?
Zana, say something.
Hey, y'all. I think they can hear me in the chat. Maybe you guys can.
There is speaking going on. Something's happening.
Okay. So why aren't we hearing it?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Are these not plugged in properly?
I don't know.
Let's try these.
It's not the speakers, right? If you say you were seeing it.
I
did
see
this whole thing yesterday.
Yeah, I see like. Oh. So we'll use hand. Z, say it again. Something.
Hello.
Yes. Well, I guess it was just on speakers, and for some reason, we'll just happen to know that that's the one. So I guess you and I are just going to have a conversation because Jen decided to disappear. Oh, Jen's coming back.
I'm so
Oh, she's got her Medicare for All vest from the Medicare for All marches.
Absolutely.
A couple years
it
back.
was a gift.
Awesome.
It was a gift from Eric Kessner. That's his name. Eric Kessner. And that's the guy who does the vests. He's this guy. I'm telling you.
That's cool.
Yeah. How's it going?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Just finished up. We were working on a video today. Actually, it was mostly Colin and Tina working on it. I didn't have a lot. I didn't contribute as much yet to this, but they interviewed for Status Coup. They interviewed one of the protesters who was arrested at Cop City. I believe it's one of the folks that was charged with domestic terrorism for basically nothing. These charges are insane. So they talked to one of the protesters down there, of course, making sure that, whatever's published and that they're respected and taken care of, as well as while we share the story. But it's crazy what's going on down there. So been trying to get the word out all weekend and early this week about, the latest updates on that.
Isn't it, to me, it's crazy that there's a place called Cop City. Can we talk about that for a second? That is...
I thought it was just slang for something.
No. And the thing is that I think it's very, very telling of this. We live in a police state. This is, and every little sense of uprising must be extinguished immediately and harshly to render future uprisings less likely. That's how authoritarians think. And that we're seeing this. I feel like we're watching it in live time. Seriously, there's a place called Cop City.
Yeah, I think
that's crazy.
Well,
that's crazy to think about. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's only so much pillaging of the environment that you can continue to do with people continuing to ignore that this is a serious problem. Regardless of what you think in terms of human activity causing runaway climate change, one thing that cannot be denied is destruction of the environment causes catastrophic problems for people's ability to live, whether it is where they can actually build homes, where you can get clean water. These are all connected.
Be careful over there, Ben. Touching that made our whole thing. Be careful you don't have it lean out of the wall at all, because that's connected to the whole system. There's like a Rube Goldberg studio situation here. So if you move one little thing, the whole system goes to shit. Sorry.
Anyway.
Well, I just moved, so I'll show you guys the secret. I'm sitting in a bed. My light's over here, and I don't even have a desk yet. So
where are you? Where are you living?
I just moved in with a friend. My landlord decided to sell the place that my daughter and I were renting. And so we were 10 days late on rent. That was it. But they decided that they were going to sell the place. And so we got a last minute notice. And of course, we didn't want it to go on our record that there was an eviction. We got out of there, and my best friend, my partner, let me move in with him for a little while. Been friends for 20 years. Lived together off and on so many times, helping each other out, and just family, basically. So I came in and I moved in with family, and we're just now getting settled and sorted. And but yeah, it's been a wild couple months, but made me think about how loose tenant laws are in this country, to have to deal with that with no recourse whatsoever. It's just how it goes. Landlord can just be like, okay, I'm going to sell this property. You got to be out in 30 days. And they can just kick you to the curb and, you high and dry.
Now, we actually have tenant laws are actually not terrible in Florida. Basically, the home could be sold at any time. But if you're in a lease, they have to honor the lease. Now, they can try to buy you out of the lease, and that does happen, especially with the crazy rising of rental rates in the state, especially in places like where we are, Orlando. Depending on how badly they think that they can increase the rent costs, if you are under contract, they could make you an offer that could be pretty substantial depending on where you want to be. But, obviously rental laws are different in every state. And you're in West Virginia, right?
Kentucky.
What's interesting is that while I see that legislatively, the laws are clearly pro-owner, pro-landlord across the board. But what's interesting is that judicially, in cases that I've seen as an attorney, the like the jurists generally tend to go in favor of tenants. They do. Like judicially, things generally go in favor of tenants. The problem is getting it to that level. Most people don't have the wherewithal or that can think to or go get help or can afford to get help or have the resources to get help. So it's easy to walk all over them. So it's really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, because legislatively you're screwed. Like I don't think there's nothing there. Nobody goes after them. But when you do, I do think that, I don't think it's as horrible judicially, but who has the resources for that?
That's the point.
Oh, yeah.
Basically,
People so much money for anything that's problematic like that. I mean, when it comes to, racial discrimination, sexual harassment, getting kicked out of your homes, of any kind of civil process as an employee, a worker, a person, it's so expensive, and a lot of times you can't find an attorney. People don't realize if there's not a cost incentive for a lot of attorneys, there's not as many that just do the good work of being able to take on cases pro bono and even being able to afford to. So there's less resources out there for people to combat the system. That's one of the ways they keep us, kind of held down. If you have the money, you have the resources to fight the injustices. Think if you have the money, you're fighting less injustices to begin with. So it's a catch-22.
Zana, I think we couldn't have probably picked a better time for you to come on. Obviously, you're aware of what's going on with Shama Suwan.
Thank you.
Finally said her name right.
Thank you.
We've always maintained that if there's going to be any type of a some type of a disruption of the two-party duopoly system, it's going to come from a labor movement.
Has to be labor.
Can't be any other way. And I think what she's attempting to do, which is obviously what was amiss with whether it is the People's Party, the Green Party, even the Libertarian Party, there has to be a very concise direction in terms of workers' rights, healthcare, environment, living wage. And this seems to be the type of movement that could really catch fire. Would love to hear your thoughts on the initial stages of forming this and what it will take to actually make it succeed, because you were obviously, front and center with an organization that attempted to do something similar. And of course, it did not succeed. So would love to hear your thoughts on what the workers' strike back movement needs to do in order to get this right.
I like the name.
I love the name. I think that it's a bold initiative.
Yeah.
One of the biggest problems I see with it right now is that it has a face and a leader. Like, my advice to Shama would be, give the microphone, start getting more voices, faces, people associated with that out there. Because one of the problems we've had on the left over and over and over again is that we keep placing our bets on a person or a personality instead of the movement and the idea. So letting the movement and the idea lead, I think, is where it's going to break through. So it's awesome having somebody as bold and well-spoken as far as being able to really alliterate the issues. Like, she's amazing at alliterating the issues, just talking through things. It's awesome to listen to her because she frames things in a way that everyone is consumable to everybody. But I just feel like we have to get away from sort of this hero bolstering that we have on the left, and we have to start this. So letting the idea of this worker party lead rather than having a face for it. That would be my first suggestion to her. Making sure that there's a very strong infrastructure, partnerships right out of the gate, and having, just like she always says for socialist alternative, having a democratic process in place that's not so flat that nothing ever gets done, like a holarchy where everyone is trying to do everything through, 1,000 committees. It doesn't work. Life can't work that way. You got to have some kind of structure. But really, I think it's about listening to the workers and supporting them. And one of the problems that I see right now with growing any kind of worker movement is only between 2 to 6% of our country is unionized at this moment. Most workplaces aren't large enough. So I think it would be interesting to see more trade unions that folks can get involved with, that either especially imagine if we had trade unions for independent contractorships right now, because so many millennials are doing gig work.
Yeah.
That could be a really interesting one. So that's one of the areas that I see where we're lacking. And then also combating temp jobs. We need to start going after these temp agencies right now who are skirting labor laws, skirting. Temp work is now 33% of the economy. And that's insane. So these places that used to hire people, used to hire them permanently, would give people benefits, would give people retirements, are now just doing the rollover, hiring and then laying off, then hiring, then laying off as the people at the top get rich. So yeah, those are my thoughts on it. It really starts with the people, and it starts with the problems that we're facing. So getting out there, and she probably already knows because they've already been talking to people.
Yeah. Well, she has actually a success rate, right? Like she's actually succeeded in getting things done. Yeah. And I also think that she is very, very in with on the ground people in the labor movement. I don't think that this is one of those things where she's clearly said this isn't about unions, because the union bosses are often just as much part of the problem. She specifically said that this is about going to all labor. This is about workers. And I think that she is the kind of person that people will want to be affiliated with. Like, I know that if she called up and said, hey, Jen, you want to start organizing the, Florida, workers strike back, I'd be like, oh yeah, sure. Please sign me up. Like, I can't help her enough. I mean, I've got my vest. I'm like, I'm ready to go. And I think that there's a lot of other people. You had even suggested connecting, like she should connect with India Walton. And that would definitely be a really good, like, cross-pollination. But I think if she can bring in those kinds of people, that it can be real. And the labor is the universal organizer. And what's interesting is that I remember when you were on with Nick and we were talking about the People's Party, moving for a People's Party. And I remember at that time saying something along the lines of, I'm not so sure that the third party is the way as much as labor uprising is the way to actually get that party. It's sort of like you can frame the party.
I agreed with you.
Right? Like you can't, it's sort of like you can make the party and hope they come, right? Or that could be the uprising. And I've been saying it for about 2 years on this show that the next movement has to come from labor and it has to come from the ground up. And that's exactly what she said in her letter. So I think she really gets it. And I wouldn't be surprised if she didn't already have a ton of things in place,
Probably does. I mean, it felt to me that she's been, I'm just assuming here that she's been working on this for a while.
Yeah.
Also, her and her team, whoever they may be, if they're coming from Socialist Alternative and the other organizing that they've done, they've already got a lot of work under their belt. Because, I mean, I've looked at the organizing that they've done in Texas, for instance, over the last, this summer, against, following the mass shootings, also showing up, all the protests that they had done in Seattle and throughout Washington State. Yeah. They really have done a lot of work on the actual ground, getting people out to push for specific initiatives. And like you said, those are wins that they can then translate into what that means for workers.
Yeah, she's connected to the people on the ground and the workers. But if not for just seriously, the fact alone that I think of her as the thorn in Jeff Bezos' side, and nothing makes me more like that, pleases me to no end. And I'm sure he'll be having parties thinking, he's finally free of her. She's not going to be on the council anymore. And I think he doesn't have any idea what she's got coming for him. He's probably thinking, oh God, thank God, there can't be anybody as radical as her that could fill that spot. Right. I just think, how many millions of dollars has he spent on that city council race every time?
Millions of dollars to him is $10-$20.
Right. But for a city council race, I don't know. I love her for that.
But I will say, history has shown, and the two most productive times in our nation's history when it came to labor were during both of the Roosevelt administrations. And part and parcel that happened because of the Eugene Debs of the world, the William Jennings Bryans of the world, that had this really big labor coalition that created so much momentum that, as FDR said, make me do it. Well, workers really grew to such a degree that they didn't have a choice. And then over the course of that 2-decade period between FDR and JFK, you had unionization in the country in, I think, like the 30 to 40% range. Today, it's at the all-time low of 10%. That's not a mistake. And you can see why so many people are getting all kinds of crazy right now about, everyone should be forming a union at their workplace. And it's true, because day by day, a lot of the disintegration of the workforce around the country in terms of their rights are just being disintegrated over and over again, whether it is corrupt union bosses, whether it's the fact that the Democratic Party is a party of Wall Street and not Main Street. There's so many machinations that have come down the pipe, but there is no doubt that if labor found a way to get its act together, I think that's the ticket for us finally moving in the direction that's going to save ourselves. I hate having to say it that way, but in many ways, that is where we're at. If we're going to save ourselves, it's going to be with labor.
Well, it wasn't. I'll have one thing to push back, and that's it. It wasn't Eugene Debs. It wasn't the people that are the faces that get the credit for this.
It's everyone else.
Yes. The people that were pissed off that caused the disruption. Without disruption, and with just a wealthy person or somebody at the helm as like a leader, and we're just behind that and we're not doing anything but going, on marches and wearing pink knitted hats, it's not going to get done. Like, we have to make people uncomfortable. I had this idea, this is so crazy, but I was like, why don't we go and just like for a week, we do things that like will disrupt people in bougie areas and get on their nerves. Like, why don't we go occupy Whole Foods parking lots for 3 days straight so that nobody can park there, and demand that their food, their ugly fruit, stuff like that, go to, because it used to go to food banks and now they've pulled that back. They're not giving the excess to anyone. They're just throwing it in dumpsters. So why don't we have a call to action like that, or a call to action to support union organizers in different ways? Like, people say, don't necessarily stop buying the product because that's paying our paychecks. But there's other ways we can make things uncomfortable. But what was so amazing about the labor movement, the march up Blair Mountain, the rallies in the street, the women who walked out of the offices in the late 80s, calling for equal pay for equal work, in the women's rights labor movement in the late 70s, early 80s, was that they were causing disruption. They were leaving the offices. They're like, hey, dude, you're not going to have anybody to get your coffee and your lunch for you today and to answer your phones. We're outie. And without the disruption, we're not going to have that. But there's something you always talk about, Jen, that's really important, you and Peter both. And that's they have to have an infrastructure. We have to have a mutual aid and a strong infrastructure in place to be able to support workers, to be able to support this disruption, to be able to protect people from being arrested, to be able to have a legal network. Without these safety nets, and we had those in the Battle of Blair Mountain to a certain extent. We've had the mutual aid. Iran right now, Iran is protesting. They have had a general strike for 90 days. And it's because in our culture in Iran, it's baked in the cake. The cultural community, the way that people come in and they feed each other and they clothe each other. And if a store closes down or there's a storm, other towns come and pick it up. We have that a little bit, but I'm telling you, it's not the same.
No, we don't have that.
Baked in. Yeah.
We don't have that. I talk about it a lot. We don't have a concern for the collective in this country. We don't think about the collective. We are a very individualistic society. And, somehow people think of that like that's such a good thing. Well, it really isn't a good thing, because people are interconnected, whether you sort of nurture it or not. And the fact that people don't understand this is what holds us back from having nice things. Because to me, it applies to everything. Okay, we're all better off with people having healthy lives. We're all better off with people having healthcare. We're all better off with people being educated. We're all better off with these things, but yet people get very, well, why should I pay for that? I'm like, there's no concept of collective. And that is our biggest problem. But yet when you look at labor, that is a common enough denominator that people can get behind. And if enough places do it, then we can get behind, because that's one of those things, like whether you were a Trump person or a Bernie person, you very likely could be a labor supporter.
They
are both. It's right. So, misguided as it may be in either direction for people, whatever it is. But
I don't think it's misguided at all. I think that people are desperate and they don't really care.
Well, no, but following somebody like Trump, who's actually a faux populist, if he were an actual populist, then you would say, yes, that makes sense. And what he's saying is populist propaganda.
Yeah, and he's been there before, and we all know that he wouldn't do the things that were necessary to help workers. Bernie obviously has espoused the message for a long time, but you have, whether you want to argue about the squad and the lack thereof in terms of their efforts on the Hill, at the same time, the part of the reason why it doesn't really makes sense to complain about what Alex and the rest of them are doing or not doing is because there isn't a robust movement cohesive on the outside that can basically pressure the hell out of them to say, listen, this is our freaking show. We put your asses there. We'll take your asses out if we have to. There isn't that pressure that has been created. And
there's no mandate. There's no mandate for anything.
Where we can ultimately talk about the fact that there are bad faith actors, especially on the left. There are people who are in it for the wrong reasons that create a lot of dissension, that are not really trying to formulate this labor movement that needs to happen. Or if they do, they want all the credit for it and they want the money and all that. I would assume that you kind of see it in a similar vein regarding the lack of cohesion in a lot of the left, populist left circles where it needs to be strong. And if it were strong, we would be having a very different conversation regarding the movement right now. Do you see it the same way?
I do. Where I see a problem is that there's two types of populism, right? Well, there's a few veins of populism, but there is the right-wing fascistic populism that can sometimes Oh, are you talking while muted?
No, blame her.
I'm sorry.
No, I apologize. I just wanted to
multitask. We multitask. Sorry.
Yeah, that's no problem. I was like, oh no, she's asking me a question. Okay. No. Sorry. I did that yesterday to Jordan, I think. So
you understand.
Yes. I was talking to my dog though, but yeah.
I do that too.
There's a couple of veins of populism, and one of them sometimes washes in some things that matter. Like there's this big anti-war protest that I don't support because the Mrs. Caucus and the People's Party are backing it. The Mrs. Caucus they support, through the Libertarian Party, they support everyone being ran out of the country who are DACA recipients. So deporting all DACA recipients. They support, completely ending immigration. They support transgenocide. So no, to hell with them. I'm not going to stand on stage and fight. If David Duke came to me tomorrow and he's like, I support Medicare for all, will you join my rally and speak with me on stage? I would tell him to go somewhere.
Right.
Because there's two types of populism. And one thing that I see on the left is there's a confusion. Like there is a swing toward that fascistic right-wing populism and calling it populism and embracing it on the left and then mixing in some socialist ideas. And then there's another left vein that is sort of can be a little bit more neoliberal sometimes, but also is pretty far left on issues. And then there's the worker movement. There's a movement that the rest of us are worried about that is a humanist, like you were talking about, the collective is a humanist collective idea of interconnectivity on how things go. And we give a damn about racial injustice. We give a damn about the LGBT community. We give a damn about the workers. We understand that, capitalism is literally killing us and that the wage gap is killing us. We understand that all these things, that the environment, the damage to the environment and everything are all intertwined, and we want the shit fixed. And I think that's the biggest bubble, but I feel like most of the people that are out there talking are talking to those two fringe sets, right? And there's no one talking to the rest of us.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that's what
and
this
Zana
says.
does talk to the rest of us. That's one reason that I think she stands out.
Yeah, well, maybe that's the person. Maybe that's the person that needs to spark it outside of the political arena, the political thing. Like when I'm talking and I say that I'm a leftist, I don't mean politically. And most certainly I don't mean that politically in this country, because that doesn't mean anything here. When
It
I
doesn't
say that,
exist here.
like for me, I think of it much more from a socioeconomic term, from a working class versus ruling class term. And much more in that vein, more so than I'm talking about my policies on, women's rights or whatever. Now, yes, I'm left on that as well. But when we're talking about workers and the class struggle, when we're talking about that, that's what we're talking about: collectivism versus authoritarianism. And it has nothing to do with Democrats and Republicans. That's a ridiculous theater.
It's much more easy to get co-opted into the whole, DeSantis and Trump phenomenon, because, the choices are so limited. People do not actually see anyone actually stepping up in a way that's going to get them excited about the prospects of the future, especially this, upcoming election cycle, which is going to be, it's going to be bad. That much I can say. But it's all about what you do outside of the electoral politics that is going to be the key for the long-term success. If all you're concerned about is whether
and local.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Local's huge.
That, and we have a state chair race that's happening in the next month here in Florida. There really isn't that much to write home about. There are some members of Gen Z that are very enthusiastic about a couple of people that are running, which is great. For the party, there's still the old pawns and even the, rooks and the bishops and even the queen that's still in place, who's our congresswoman. And until those things change here in Florida, we're going to be dealing with the ascension of the Ron DeSantises of the world. Yeah. And there's a lot of others out there who will seize on that opportunity. Because what I see all the time is, especially when it comes to, let's say, permanent Washington, the deep state, if you will, there has been a significant shift in terms of where things were 15, 20 years ago with the GOP to where they have completely co-opted the Democratic establishment in so many ways. I think that has been done deliberately as a means to kind of confuse a lot of the population, because they knew how effective Bernie was. Even back in 2015, they saw what he was, what he represented, and how he could actually cultivate tens of millions of people. But if they co-opt the Democratic Party to the degree in which it basically becomes the suburban Republican Party, that people are not really going to know what to do. They're not going to really, the Republican Party represented, the Democratic Party. I like that Ron DeSantis. That guy is definitely speaking my language. I definitely like what he has to say. I can't stand these two parties. And let me tell you, I hear that a lot, Z. I hear that constantly about how I hate the two parties. But I like Ron DeSantis. I like Donald Trump. And that is the problem with where we are right now. The system will not course correct, and they are determined to destroy themselves and all of us to avoid a working class uprising in the United States. That's what I see. I don't think politics is complicated. I think people are complicated. You just have to be willing to cut through the bullshit, which I think is very ego driven and very tribal driven as to why that doesn't happen as much as it should.
And I think people like DeSantis and Trump. There are poor working people that like DeSantis and Trump, but if you
lots,
if you look at it statistically, it's very marginally a lot lower. The media loves to tell us that, but it's mostly upper middle class whites in the suburbs that support DeSantis. It's wine moms that support DeSantis and Trump. It's people that want to maintain that middle class. I own a home. I have 2 cars. My kid can go to soccer. I have these things, and these GD millennials and Zoomers, they want the same thing, but there's not enough for all of us. And these people are saying that they're going to secure this for us, and they're going to secure the middle class. We like that. We want our taxes cut. We want to be able to keep our health insurance and our decent jobs. And that's what it boils down to, I think, sometimes. And that's where the pressure comes in with the younger audiences. Now, there are people that I live in Kentucky, so I see it. There are people that are, working class, blue collar people, but there's this mythology that, most of Trump supporters are that, and most of DeSantis supporters, and most of the right wing, most of the people that are either staunchly Democrat, staunchly Republican, or fall into that, MAGA category are upper middle class white people. And I don't have anything against upper middle class white people as a whole. There's good people, there's bad people across all spectrums. But what I'm trying to get at is I don't feel like there's anyone out there talking to the people that aren't voting, the 73% that say they identify as independent. I think that we keep focusing on who is voting and not the people that don't show up, which is the majority of the country, because we don't have anyone there to speak for them. And I think those are the people that we're really going to be able to mobilize in a labor movement. And those people, a lot, social issues, for instance, there's this whole anti-woke thing. Social issues matter to people. If a candidate ran on not caring about women's rights, even in Kentucky, they would lose. If they ran on an anti-gay platform in Kentucky, they would lose in this state. They would lose. We have a massive gay community in Louisville and Lexington. We do. LGBT community here is strong, and it always has been. It was the first state to pass fairness ordinances in the country. So you run on that, you lose. So we had some running on for state house, we had some people that were anti-woke, and they got crushed by regular working people. So it's, I don't know, I feel like we kind of have to get beyond the politics is important, local politics is extremely important, but I feel like we have to get beyond this misconception of what the working class is. They're not MAGA, they care about social issues, they're not a bunch of ignorant bigots. They're smart, they're educated, they're poor, a lot of them are. And, they work all the time. So most of them don't even know what the hell's going on. They're not plugged in like we are. They're working 2 jobs and taking their kids back and forth to school. And they might not even know who the hell DeSantis is, except for seeing him on TV twice.
Yeah, well, most people have no participation in the political system whatsoever. That's the majority of people. We live in a bubble of that. And so even when we're talking about the general group that we're talking about, that's still a pretty small niche. Like we're a niche in the niche, and there's really not, it's by design. When somebody is working 3 jobs and they're just busting ass to just keep food on the table, they don't have time to get involved in politics. They don't have time to get involved in organizations that are protesting. And the thing is, in reality, it doesn't matter who's president to them. It really doesn't. Like if you go into the places in this country where people are struggling, it's generational. This is not something that it mattered to them whether or not it was Trump or Biden. And many of them don't know one way or the other. Most people don't even vote.
Because our lives didn't change, Jen.
Right, exactly.
I think that you should talk to Shama about this, because when you guys were running, one thing that I always said that I had a lot of respect for your campaign for, because I was there, I was like promoting it through BNC and having you guys send me stuff to share and occasionally writing emails. I remember the things that you guys were doing on the ground through generational change with your campaign money.
Yeah.
While I saw other candidates raise 2, 3, 4 million and spend it on the campaign, that's fine. You guys were raising money and actually doing organizing, whether it be a protest to demand something real that could get done locally, not some way up in the air thing that's just fundraising BS. You actually had like people that you were going to pressure for specific things, or it was the food drives that you guys were doing. The flooding drives to help with the flooding in Miami and other places in Florida. The hurricane relief where people were still not, I think there was an event for like roofing or something that you guys even did. Like it was things that were real and tangible that you were using your campaign funds on. So when people are like this or that, S-lib, not S-lib, whatever, I'm like, look, Jen Perlman was one of the few that actually spent campaign dollars on organizing on the ground. Because I remember you saying, because you had some contractors that came in that were shitty. Oh yeah, girl. We're not talking about that.
You learn as you go.
Yep. But I remember you guys saying after that, I don't want to spend money on this nonsense. Let's spend money on organizing. That's the best way to advertise, and we can help people at the same time. And to be honest, the right wing are really good at that, y'all.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
they do on the ground stuff all the time for people. They'll do baseball games. They'll give to Optimus Leagues. They'll have drives. The church.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for us, it's really about service. It's always, the whole point is that representation is supposed to be a term of service. So my thought is, if you're going to run for the representative, you want to be the representative, just be the representative. So, I mean, really, it was just about showing up in different communities and helping where they needed help. That's really all it was. And it isn't even necessarily where it's all successful. But I got to tell you, what people really want is somebody who sees them and will fight for them and be transparent with them. That's what they want. They don't expect people to get in there and get all these things done. They don't. But you should see people's faces when we're canvassing. And I'm saying, what do you need? What's going on with you right now? Is there anything I can do that can help you? And there were some times where we could, but these are people who, they don't ever see their congressperson, doesn't ever come there or have events that they could actually go to or whatever.
Or ask them, how are you doing? What do you need?
Our congresswoman doesn't even take appointments with people. And that's supposed to be part of your job. Like, our congresswoman wouldn't even meet with one of our local leading organizers for Bernie, for PDA, for all those groups. This was like the person who was the hub of that. I don't know if you knew Mitchell Stolberg, and he was somebody who spoke for a lot of people down here, and she wouldn't even meet with him. Like, how is that representing anybody, right? Like, so we wanted to use our campaign to demonstrate what it's supposed to look like.
The best was when we have a local organization, a great nonprofit that does food distribution for underserved communities. And once her campaign got wind of it, they figured, well, the best way to counter that is to get Debbie to go out with one of the big box groups, and handing out food. And of course, she did it one time for about an hour. And so that is supposed to make it look like I'm really representing you. Now, Debbie's one of the absolute worst in all of politics. So using her as a barometer is not necessarily,
she's definitely the low end.
The example of, somebody who eventually gets a little fire lit under their ass, like a Jimmy Gomez, who is not the worst representative in the world, but he's still a corporate Democrat. And every time somebody challenges him in East LA, he's got literally his boots on the ground out in the streets working his butt off. That's part of the job. That's what you're supposed to be doing. Not like, oh, crap, I might lose my very lucrative position. And I would love to hear your thoughts on,
It's ironic. It's ironic because I truly believe that if you were serving and being the actual representative in the way that you're supposed to be the representative, you wouldn't be beatable by an election.
No,
I actually believe that if you were doing your work and you were working in your community and you spent your months not in Washington actually serving your community, and your community knew you and it was how it was supposed to be, that you would just keep that, people would want to support you. I actually believe that to be true. And I think that I'd love to see somebody prove that not to be the case, because I think that's true.
Instead, Dems and Republicans have to try to keep people from voting and pour tens of millions in and keep people out of the polls and off the ballot in order to protect their incumbents from any kind of challenge or from being replaced.
Well, I also think that one of the more underrated aspects of Alex beating Crowley was the fact that he wasn't even in the district. He wasn't there, wasn't representing the people. And that's a very common problem with a lot of these representatives. They're only there when they feel like they absolutely have to be there. And that's still a big problem. But I am curious from your perspective, being involved with BNC and knowing that there is so much discombobulation on the left. It does seem that a lot of people end up running for offices that is, you could call it punching above your weight class and all that. But it seems that a lot of people are not as strategic, particularly on the populist left, that they need to be and should be. And that ultimately serves as a deterrent for the actual movement itself, because there is only so much funds to go around in order to help a lot of these campaigns. It takes a lot of money, especially to run for Congress. It's even more insane to run for the U.S. Senate, especially if you're doing it in a big state. And so where do you see sort of the fault lines regarding, where things could have been done better, differently, and could still be done fairly well going forward if the strategy was more sound?
Well, I think that people being nominated to run was really cool. Like some of the best candidates that we had running were nominated by their communities. Like the real, some of the most salt of the earth candidates that I had on the slate were nominated by their communities to run. Another thing, and Thomas just mentioned it. Hi, Thomas. My bestie. That's why we need to focus on local and state office. Going to get to that in just a moment. But the second big thing is accountability. We have a lot of these orgs. We have Our Rev, Justice Democrats, Brand New Congress. They said, and Jen, because you signed it, when you ran, that we would hold people accountable to the policies, that we're signing on to hold people accountable to the policies. But once these people get elected, it's like fundraising goes above holding them accountable. And I witnessed this at Brand New Congress. I wish them well. I don't hold anything against them, but I'm just being honest. They were wanting to take accountability out of the mission statement. And I'm kind of like, well, what's the point? If we're an organization that's going to endorse people, withholding that endorsement is your power. Speaking out, speaking in support when support is needed, but also speaking out when a challenge is needed. To be able to challenge these organizations, not challenging and just falling in line like the DSA has on some things. What happened with the railroad strike is all these orgs fell in line with the squad and stuff, and the Democrats they endorsed, everyone fell in line against the workers and was out there, making excuses for this vote. No, the point of these orgs and the reason that people volunteer and support them is to hold these representatives accountable. I believe that should be the point of a damn party too.
Yeah. Well, what about when I say this
doesn't work? Go ahead.
I say this about the Progressive Caucus, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, I keep saying, what is the point? What is the point of a block of people? Well, I mean, the fact that there's certain people in there is just silly. But what is even the point of having a block if you don't ever do anything? I would also like to suggest that we stop using the term squad. And I did a little bit on this where I actually pulled up the definition of squad. And by definition, squad is a team of people that come together to perform a mission. That's the definition of a squad. And I would suggest that there is no cohesive enough group to say that it is a squad. And so, to me, that's just sort of like this media term that's like this media theater term that we use to basically talk about the handful of people that were supposed to be fighting for the left, but don't really.
I think we'll just say that every time. The handful of people that was supposed to fight for the left, but don't really. We'll put that on every graphic. That'll be the hashtag.
But don't you think that's more fitting than squad?
Yeah.
The only one of that group that really seems like has real fire in the belly is Rashida. Because she still does, especially when it comes to Israel-Palestine. She's not backing down. And that
she won't come on, though. I want her to come on so badly and do
you have to deal with Russia.
I know. And Russia is like the gatekeeper. And for some reason, it's hard to get through. And
But the problem with Alex and the problem with Corey in particular is I understand that they have this irrational to a degree fear that the party is just going to sick the wolves on them if they don't just do what they're told. But my attitude is you're so inspiring to the people in New York City and St. Louis. You can be cultivating that support network in such a way that there is nothing DC can do to take you out of power.
Where you can say, fine, bring it.
Go ahead, Jen. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, I would love somebody to get in that doesn't give a shit about being reelected.
That's what I was just about to say. And they shouldn't care.
And Alex is talking about relational problems. You're not there to make friends, honey. That's not the point. This isn't like a sorority.
Alex is
She told us when she ran at Brand New Congress. The whole damn point, the whole point was to not make friends. The whole point was to raise hell. The whole point was to push the envelope. If they're not doing that, there is no point. I understand that sometimes there has to be some kind of compromise. That's why I mentioned the war rally thing that I'm upset about, because you don't compromise with the damn Mrs. Caucus. If you have to always look at the broader picture, you can sometimes come together on one issue, one random issue or another, but you do have to look at the bigger picture. When I look at the bigger picture of, what Corey's done, what AOC has done, Corey backed out on her housing as a human rights legislation, as soon as Biden gave that 60-day moratorium with her on the steps, she totally dropped that and stopped promoting the housing as a human right. And I'm like, this bill, you being on the steps, she could have pressured with that opportunity for that bill. And that's what she should have done.
What are they threatened with? What are they threatened with? What do you think?
I don't think they're threatened with anything. My honest to God truth, my honest to God feeling is, once you get up there, you're surrounded with people that tell you to do the greatest good. You have to play ball. You have to do this. You have to do that. They get these DC insider. And then I met a lot of people that ran, and I'm just going to be honest, and I'm not going to say who because I don't want to throw anyone under the bus.
Right.
But after they ran, it changed them. They wanted to run again. They started becoming like kind of self-absorbed.
I know who you're talking about, and I don't even have to. And it's interesting. And I always think about the same thing. And of all the people that I know of, or at least it's the person that comes to my mind. That's what's really interesting. We'll have to discuss after.
And
that's
in a
really
situation where sometimes you end
well,
up running.
it's like there were several of them that I met like this. It was really concerning to me because it's like after people run, like I met them in the beginning and then after the race and then even after sometimes running a couple times. And just to be clear, I'm not talking about my bestie Paula, as I said, ran a couple times. But there that hasn't done that, to be honest. But
there really, you don't think you find anybody who hasn't done that? Yeah, you do.
Occasionally, but it does change you, and I understand why, because you're thrown into the spotlight. You have to worry about what you say. You have all these people around you that are you know what it was like to run.
But to me, if you get elected, you don't like. To me, if you're going in there with a perspective of I am here to spend these 2 years busting ass, using my platform, causing a ruckus, helping labor, doing everything I can. I don't expect to get legislation passed. I'm not delusional, right? But I'm going to use this platform to bring the outside in as much as I possibly can. And I don't give a shit about being reelected. Imagine how powerful that is.
Wasn't that the point, Jen? And then that's
my point. That's my point.
That was the point of brand new Congress and Justice Democrats, though. That was the whole thing that I wrote emails promising people for 4 years when I worked for brand new Congress that we were going to do. But that brings me to the very third and last thing I was going to mention. And I just want to throw that out there really quickly. My biggest lesson learned is to turn my attention away from federal politics, from the House and the Senate. We can work on that. I'm not saying to completely ignore it, but I feel like there needs to be a lot stronger focuses at the state level and municipal levels, because for God's sake, the stuff that is being passed in the state houses now are just straight up fascism and corporatism. Like some of these laws, like some of the right to work laws, anti-abortion laws.
We're in Florida. We got the trifecta.
I know Florida's like Kentucky. We Florida and Kentucky right in the same boat, man, on this stuff. It's bad. And they are literally chipping away not only at our civil liberties, but our economic rights. And it's bad. It's bad. And that's all being done at the local, state, and municipal levels. And you know what? That is the battle. That is where the Tea Party is focused. That's where the right wing is focused. And they're taking them. Every single election cycle, they take more state houses. Have you guys noticed?
Oh, and it's been very systemic. It's been very purposeful.
It's intentional.
It's intentional, but I actually think that it's somewhat intentional in the higher rankings when you look at the Democratic Party for allowing it to happen. And basically,
they absolutely, they didn't even run people in half of my state and your state, right?
Yeah. Oh, we had a handful. There were I want to say there were 20 something state house seats that were viable, that they didn't even try. They didn't even do anything. They didn't even.
There's a great guy.
And then they threw money behind people like Charlie Crist.
Yeah, there's a great guy named Anthony.
Yes, Charlie Crist. Yeah.
Anthony Nieves is up in the Orlando, Osceola County area.
Great guy.
And he was really a true grassroots candidate. I had no idea. He almost won his race with less than $15,000. And the party couldn't see to it to throw him 10 grand right at the end just to make sure he had enough to go. He lost the race by a point.
Yeah.
And to me.
And he was their candidate. He was their Democratic candidate.
Yeah, that's deliberate. That's deliberate.
Because he was a progressive.
Yeah, you don't. Well, stop using the word progressive.
All right, not progressive. He was somebody who cared about working people.
Non-corporate
Correct.
populace.
Correct.
And when you have the ability to get because there is no distinction between there. If you want the most clear-cut distinction, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to political terms, you're either corporate or non-corporate. Make a choice. Like that's how it is. There's no shades of gray.
Not really.
You are either on the side of workers or you're on the side of shareholders. You have to make a choice. That's how it works. Now you can co-opt terms like progressive, which has been done.
Well, that's why, when we talk same thing about left, what is left here in this country? Left is not left. Left is center. I mean,
there's no left party that exists here whatsoever. They're both fascistic right-wing parties.
Right. It's shades of fascism. But like, what's interesting is that, but when I say, that's why I say, when I say left, I'm not talking about our political system. I'm talking like in a global sense. But and I think that like my fellow people know what I'm talking about. But no, there is no left in our political system here. There is no left.
And that's what we have to work on, because people don't like the terms. No one wants to be talking about I'm left, I'm this. I always say the best example I can give was on election day. We were helping out great guy, Nick Sorrell. He's now the mayor of the town that we both live in, Plantation, which is for all intents and purposes may very well, if Jen were to run again, would be ground zero against Wasserman Schultz. This is the most affluent.
Although she lost a chunk of the district. Wait till you see how little of it is in.
Yeah, it's Plantation's probably the most affluent Jewish part of the current congressional district. So there's that tug of war with those voters. And one of the things that I really took away from being out at the polls on election day, because it turns out that we were supporting the candidate that would be in line to support somebody like Jen, whereas the person who was the mayor was one of Debbie's biggest sycophants that was in elected office, and she lost. And so the fact that this gentleman was there, it was a great experience canvassing and meeting all these people. But the person that stood out the most to me was this firefighter who I was speaking to for a great length when we were at the polls on election day. And he made it very clear that he supports the living wage. He supports universal health care. He supports protecting the environment. And he supports Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump like you can't believe. And so to me, what that tells me is get the labels the hell out of the way. Keep it specifically to the issues at bar. It will be amazing how many people will come on board. And the people
that's why we can win if we focus locally.
That is right.
And we can make an immediate change. I feel like right now we are constantly funneled. And, I worked for an organization trying to reshape Congress. I believed in that for like 4 years. But I came out of that realizing, and I'm not saying to throw away congressional races. I'm not saying to ignore them.
Right.
But we have to start we are ignoring, the left has been ignoring local seats, state houses. The Democratic Party, like you had said, Nancy Pelosi came out in 2018 and she talked about the throwaway states. Do you guys remember that speech?
Yeah.
The freaking throwaway state.
The middle of the country, it don't matter.
Listen, I have a fundraising gig I have to get to.
You cannot do winning.
But it's emblematic of all. And the truth is, if 94.5% of congressional representatives get reelected every 2 years, and the requirements at a minimum, if you're going to have any shot at winning, is $500,000. And that is dependent upon where you are exactly. Because when you're in places like the Miami market, Chicago market, DC market, New York market, with rare exceptions, it takes even considerable more money than that. And then it comes down to whether or not you're a truly dynamic change agent type of a candidate that truly inspires a lot of people. Ken Mejia in LA was one of those candidates. And even though he couldn't break through into Congress, he's now the city comptroller of Los Angeles. And that's a pretty big deal. And he's under the Green Party banner on top of everything else. But that is a rare exception.
We need to figure out a way to get Matthew Ho somewhere.
Matthew Ho is a great candidate.
How do we do that? Like, Peter thinks he should run.
Matthew Ho, Ryan Kajatste. I don't know if you guys remember him. He ran and he actually worked in San Francisco. He actually ran against Pelosi the first time in 2018 when Shaw had first ran. He was running in the primary against him, but he was like, Ryan is amazing, young, an attorney, and he helped. You guys may remember the guy's name in San Francisco who did away with the bail bond system.
Oh, you're talking about Chesa Boudin.
Chesa Boudin, yes, Chesa Boudin. So he worked with Chesa Boudin to do away with the bail bond system. And so we need people like that, like Shama, like Matthew Ho, like others that have actually done stuff on the ground and got work done. Another great one is Rebecca Parson.
Rebecca Parsons.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
She did a ton of local work, local ballot initiatives, local state house work, where she pushed the state house to fund on that side of the state public transit, like to increase the rates of public transit and to potentially start a mass rail system there. A mass public rail system is in consideration because of Rebecca Parson. She's kind of a badass. So there's all these badasses. Yeah. Maybe Shama could reach out to.
That's the whole point. That's our goal.
People that we don't know.
That's what we try to do, is make those connections and build the coalition and make sure that the web gets bigger and bigger. And I think there are a lot of people that are doing really cool things, and even people that didn't necessarily win, that are using that platform.
Another person who's solid, who's in Washington State, is Jason Cole. I mean, you bring
I love Jason.
A number of those people that have the experience that may not have been elected into federal office, state office, etc., the ability to build out this coalition now. I mean, to me, if Kashama can accomplish anything, Shama, sorry. I'm a white American.
You're
So if you're going to if Shama's going to build this coalition and could build it very strong in Washington State, which is actually one of the most neoliberal states in the whole freaking country.
Major income and disparity issues there.
But what could happen with the result of bringing in the Jason Coles and the Rebecca Parsons and building this coalition, maybe they do have a fighting chance at whole Washington in passing a statewide universal health care single payer system. And everyone is going to say, well, you can't pay for it if you don't have federal backing. Well, the goal here is to at least get it to the point where it's going to become so pressured on Patty Murray and everybody else that they're not going to have a choice, because it's only going to take one domino that's going to fall. The New York Health Act, CalCare, whole Washington. These are the types of initiatives that if they're fought on, which no one gives a rat's rear end about their political party affiliation when it comes to whether or not we should have for-profit middlemen in between us and our doctors. They have no reason to exist. I don't want to hear any arguments about how, well, it's government control. No, it's government-funded healthcare, numbnuts. That's what it is.
The truth is, I'm just done. I don't debate.
Can't debate anybody anymore.
I'm so done with it. I don't discuss
Doesn't make any sense.
Just like
most people agree with it. It's just how you frame it to them. I mean, I've talked to people that call themselves conservatives that by the time that I was off the phone with them, they agreed with me that, we need tuition-free college and healthcare for all. It's all in how you talk about it. I agree. I don't want to wade into the state by state versus national, all that. Going on about healthcare, because I believe in both.
Yes.
I definitely see where people are coming from that say, yes, let's help Washington get it. But I also know that there's been many of those dominoes that have fallen in states that did not turn into anything national. And I'm sitting here in Kentucky with 75% fewer rights than people in many of the states in the country.
Right.
Oh, you're
and you're in Florida, so. So you're in the same boat. Oh God.
We are in, and what's sad is, stop, it's so gross. And what's sad is that even though, and we're in Florida and people look at that like, oh, it's red now, it's DeSantis, it's how, sad for you. What's actually worse for us is the neoliberal blue bastion in which we are suffocated in Broward County. That is a way bigger problem. I swear to you, our problem in this state.
I'll scream it now from the rooftops until it becomes reality. And that is, until Wasserman Schultz goes, this will continue.
Well, and I don't even just say, okay, it isn't. My point is that the real issue is not that it's the Republicans. It's that there's no resistance. And even
I hate that word.
I love the word resistance.
I hate that word.
Well, I don't care. I'm a Star Wars person. It's resistance.
There's no hell raising. How about that?
There's
nobody fighting. There's nobody doing anything. And so that's the problem here. So our problem isn't the right. We don't even get that far.
Just think of it this way. Think of 2024. Let's say a circumstance presents itself where Jen actually has a path to actually run against Wasserman Schultz and had a chance to win, because that's the only way it's worth doing. But if that were to be the case, and whoever the Democratic statewide nominee will be in 24, because there will only be one race, and that will be against Rick Scott. And you ask anyone with any logic behind them would say, would you rather have Debbie Wasserman Schultz or Jen Perlman going around the state of Florida campaigning for whoever the hell it is that is the nominee, running against Rick Scott? Who is going to have a better opportunity to convert independent voters to vote for the Democratic nominee versus Rick Scott? It sure as shit ain't going to be Debbie Wasserman Schultz. So if you have any hope of transforming the dynamic within the third most populous state in the union now, in what used to be seemingly a circumstance where the state was competitive, the Democrats were getting so caught up in this idea. That's good.
Debbie's gotta go.
If you would have looked at it, let's just say 2016, 2017, and saw where the party has completely blown it here, where they were able to convert Georgia. Now that Florida is a 30 electoral solid red state, you can kiss Georgia goodbye, because that's going to, their infrastructure is going to go so top heavy into that state. And it already has, because
they're going to turn into West Virginia, and they're just going to, I mean, they're already Warnock. Yeah. They're already pushing out Joe Manchin's, you know, they're already manufacturing the next Wasserman Schultz. I mean,
think of it this way.
Same problem in Washington. We have the same problem in West Virginia when Paula was running both times. But go ahead.
Well, no, you have a lot of problems in West Virginia.
But if you look at Georgia as a prime example with what's going on in Cop City right now, and knowing for a fact that if you elect representatives that are co-opted by the machine, which they are, John Ossoff and Senator Raphael Warnock, they might be very nice guys. They certainly seem to be. But you know what? They take a boatload of that corporate money. And when it comes to questioning the infrastructure of the capitalist, runaway, broken system that we have right now, they have not made a statement about Cop City, and they're not going to.
Hell no, they're not. Not a word. They're not going to say anything about it. We asked them. We've asked them.
Yeah.
I have literally messaged both of them for status quo news, and I haven't heard anything from them back.
Yeah. And you won't, you won't. And that comes down to who funds them. That's all about funding, because people that don't have owners are more inclined to comment on things. So it's hard when you're owned to be able to comment on things. It's very unfortunate.
Yeah.
And yet we're still infinitely better off than had Herschel Walker. Good God, people.
But it should never have to come to that.
No, well, it's just silliness.
If we were living in a country that understood their own power, as Thomas Jefferson so brilliantly said, when the people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. And if you have a situation where the government completely owns or is completely owned by corporate special interests, even if the most corporate-friendly whore, which she is, in Marjorie Taylor Greene, can occasionally throw a few lines out there about how I'm populist this on this one issue, I'm completely owned on the other 99. But
I'm anti-war in Ukraine, but I want war with China and Iran tomorrow.
Bingo. But and so people are like, you see, she's against it. She's not against anything.
She's left of AOC. That's what I've been hearing this week. Left? Are you kidding me? I have so much to say about Alex, and I've been vocal, but Marjorie Taylor Greene isn't left of AOC. That's insanity. And you can't look at one issue in a vacuum, because there's interconnectivity, right? What does she want to defund the military to do? What do these people want to defund the military to do who forced the vote? Which, great, they forced the vote. It worked. Yes, we knew it worked because we did it in 2018. Already knew this would work. In 2018, 23 people voted against Pelosi. And many of the few of those handful of people that shouldn't be were supposed to do things for us, called the squad, the unsquad, they got all these committee seats because we threatened them to run Barbara Lee. Do you guys remember that?
Yes.
We already knew it worked. It worked in 2018. People don't remember that. Like, that's where this idea came from in the first place. But progressives had already done it. So yeah, the Tea Party, they pushed the vote. That's great. Good for them. But What the hell did they ask for? People are saying, like, I agree with this. I agree with this. I agree with cutting military funding. Read the second line to why they cut military funding. They want to cut military funding to send that money to the border, to militarize our border, and to send DACA recipients back to their country, and to bolster ICE to do it. That's the second caveat. The first is let's cut the military budget. The second is let's use this money to militarize our borders and bolster ICE so that we can round up DACA recipients and put them in concentration camps, essentially.
Yeah. See how much easier it is.
That second part matters. Yes, we should cut the military funding, but we should be there on the front lines if they do, and they want to send that money over there to fight against that. And if we're not saying both sides of that story, if we're not telling the full context, people are missing that. And they're just like, Marjorie Taylor Greene is an anti-war goddess.
Right.
You know?
Yes, that's what she is. I look at her and what comes to mind is pacifism. That's what comes to mind when I look at her. She is a piece of work, let me say.
Well, yeah. I just wanted to come on here. It's very important that people make sure this weekend, very important, there is a big show going on. Jen, good to see you.
Hi.
Zana, a real pleasure. You did a wonderful job at Brand New Congress. So I just want to come on here and let everybody know that this Saturday and Sunday from, I believe, 12 to 3 p.m., you're going to want to tune in to Status Quo News. They are doing this very big on-the-ground fundraiser. The people that are going to be joining, my good friend Nina Turner will be there. Stephen Donziger will be there.
Are you going to be there?
Well, I might make an appearance. You never know. We'll see.
Okay.
Yeah, come join us, Peter.
I don't know who Peter is, but, I'm a little busy.
Bernie.
I told him you guys should have him come on and do some of his characters.
It is very important that we understand that what is going on in Georgia right now is an absolute devastation to the environment, to civil liberties, and we have a police state that must be dealt with. It is not good, so please, if you can, make sure that you tune in to Status Quo News on Saturday and Sunday. Zana will be there too. It'll be great. And you'll learn a lot about all the terrible things, unfortunately, that are going on in the country right now, but we need on-the-ground reporting. It is very important, so make sure you get over there. Good to see you guys, and hope you're enjoying the show.
Bye, Bernie.
Go write the damn bill, Bernie.
Yeah, well, I wish Bernie... There's a lot of things we wish Bernie
It
would have
doesn't,
done.
you know what? I hate doing that because I feel like what you were saying earlier is true. It isn't about one person. It's not supposed to be about one person. And instead of criticizing Bernie for what he hasn't done, I choose to look at the amount of stuff that he has done and where he has brought this to where it is. It was never his job to lead a revolution. His job, he took it as far as he took it, the end. That's what he did. Anybody else can jump in and join in, and it shouldn't be just one person. It was never meant. He always said, not me, us. He wasn't kidding people. And I can't stand when people harp on him. It's like...
People are desperate.
Well, and that I appreciate. But he's the person who's done the most. He's the reason we're talking about universal health care.
I do not take, when he says my good friend Joe,
that's annoying. It's annoying.
He at least was, and especially his campaign in 2016,
yes.
No one can ever take away from how hard he fought, what he was willing to put up with, the lengths that Debbie and the Clintons and all of them went to cheat him out of the nomination. Hillary Clinton would have been president if it was a fair primary. That's the bottom line. You could say whatever the hell you want. You can complain. You could blame progressives. That was a stolen primary, if there ever was one. And you paid twice.
And little Miss Debbie had a lot to do with that.
She certainly did. And
there still has not been, as far as
I'm reckoning.
No, there's been no real accountability for that. I mean, what happened? So she left that position and then went right into Hillary's campaign. And yeah, granted, she had delusions of maybe being Secretary of State or something. That's what I think. She had delusions of some sort of cabinet appointment. Like, I can't fathom what it would be.
The party doesn't work, and it doesn't work because there is no accountability. If we replicate this with a party, or we replicate with a movement, or we try to build something our own on the left, one thing that we do have to have is accountability. We have to have some basic human principles. That's why I said I'm not going to stand on the stage. Even if David Duke supports Medicare for all, I'm not rallying with him.
But you see, you don't.
As the leader, as the face for Medicare for all, no. No, you need to go back and you need to fix your other humanitarian problems that you are, you know.
But that's a non-starter, because David Duke is not somebody that I would ever associate with or would take seriously. It's no different than, you know, somebody like a Ben Shapiro. Their intent is not to actually make things better. Steven Crowder's even worse, because for them, this is all about a career, a very lucrative career.
Or a Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Exactly.
Or these representatives that are the same way. I think that there are opportunities to work together, especially on the left, but it's so strange because I see this cancel culture on the left where it's like, oh my God, you posted a video from the Humanist Report, so now you are no longer a leftist and you're forever canceled. Right. But then it's like somebody goes on Tucker Carlson, doesn't challenge him, and then it's like, oh, you know, this person is still a true leftist, or they come out and they'll say something anti-trans, or they'll like skirt around with, you know, they'll like Thomas says, they'll work with the Mrs. Caucus, who have been like, they're horrible. They're basically, they are Christo-fascist white nationalist. That's what the Mises Caucus is.
Listen, as far as I'm concerned, you have to subscribe to the Daily Wire. It's a really great channel. I've been running it for a number of years. Believe me, we do a lot of great content, and all these complaining people who have no understanding whatsoever about how the country works and how it operates. You are just complaining. You haven't had a good job, and that's your problem. It's not my problem, and it's not anybody else's problem. The Daily Wire knows exactly what they're doing, and you should just subscribe to our channel.
You know
Steven Crowder missed out on
a great opportunity. You sound too smart to be Ben Shapiro. You need to dumb that down a little.
Well, that's why he talks so fast. Ben talks that fast because people, it's like it makes him sound smarter.
I talk that fast because my brain operates at a much higher functional level than everybody else's does. Whenever I speak, it's the theories are grander. Everyone wants to hear it. It's really great. Incredibly pointed stuff.
Terrible. He's terrible.
He is the embodiment in many ways of that guy that you go to school with, who couldn't put any muscle on, didn't have a girlfriend, wasn't popular.
Clearly he doesn't know what wet pussy is. So clearly he's got some issues. I'm just saying.
And very much like a lot of other, you know, men that are highly functioning in certain respects, whether it is academically, economically. Sheldon Adelson was a great example of that. Even somebody like Elon Musk, and especially somebody like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates, when they get that power, they wield it like an axe. They want to get back at everybody that either offended them, made them feel less of a man. That's why Ben gets very, like, you know, triggered and wired when somebody talks about his masculinity. Like, how masculine am I? It's
all
like,
right, let's talk about masculinity.
Well, I don't know. Go ahead, Jen, but I have something to say about that.
About Ben Shapiro, please do.
Well, my thoughts on him are the same as my thoughts on all guys like that, whether muscly and masculine or not, or whether squirrely, you know, and in the books. It's a class issue for me. Yeah, he's a spoiled little rich kid that feels entitled to everything. And at the end of the day, whether they were, you know, pop collar, you know, frat boys that are, you know, outspoken and red pilled, or kind of shy, they're all, it's all the same entitled crowd. That's where I agree.
I'm just saying that guy is Steven Crowder. Like, he is that guy.
And they're equally as annoying. The point is that it's irrelevant.
Jackson Hinkle. Like,
Jackson Hinkle
he's trying hard to be that guy. I don't know if he is that guy, but that's the whole persona.
I think that these are more just characters, and it's to some extent it's their shtick.
Yeah, they're acting.
And if you want to criticize Jimmy for one thing in particular, it's one thing if you have, you know, your own content, which can be heavily criticized. What he does that is a big problem is he brings along these sycophants, these people who have no intention to help the movement whatsoever, only to help themselves. Jackson's probably the best example out of all of them, where if you bow at the altar of Mr. Door, I will give you the time of day. And I will allow you, my 1 million+ subscribers, to hear your message. And the next thing you know, your Patreon of $500 a month will turn into $5,000 a month. And then you have a career. And now you can build off of it. But you must be loyal to what I say.
If you are not, I will cut you up at the knees and make you disappear. So the God complex is very strong with that one. And
oh God, yeah, that's all accurate. I can't disagree, because I see it, and I see if I have a legitimate criticism, sometimes he'll come on and retweet it and troll those criticisms from small accounts, even like mine with like 2,000 followers. I saw the other day, it was like somebody who had like 150 followers, and then they got harassed by hundreds of people after they just posted one legit criticism about just facts. And I'm like, this is not healthy. This is like the bully pile-on complex. And, you know, I don't blame Jimmy for the way his audience acts unless he promotes it and is doing it. And that's what I see happening. Because sometimes you can't always control the way that the people who follow you behave, right? But you can.
It's like a mini Trump. It's a mini Trump. You're basically just fueling up a base to keep yourself and to keep your sort of carnival salesman, snake oil carnival system going.
And I take it back. And I take it back. The worst person that Jimmy promotes is not Jackson Hinkle. It is Nick Brana. And the reason I say it's Nick more than anybody else is because Jackson clearly is doing this for a grift. Nick is still trying to convince people that the People's Party is something, that it's going somewhere, that it's actually fighting the good fight. And Jimmy keeps bringing him on and promoting it. That is
isn't he funded? Wasn't that party funded a lot by Jimmy? Wasn't he like a big donor?
Yeah.
I don't think he donated as much as him and Nick are just really good friends, and they share each other's content. They boost each other. And then Nick comes up with these outrageous grifts like this anti-war rally. This is not an anti-war rally. I don't know how much I can say this. I hate to speak out against organizing. I never like to do it. Yeah. But this is the Libertarian Party, now the Mrs. Caucus, basically, because they kicked everyone out. The chair of the Mrs. Caucus, who is now the chair of the Libertarian Party, and the chair of the People's Party, Nick Brana, got together, and they said people are terrified that we're about to have a nuclear war. Which we are. We're scared to death. Sure. So they said, let's have a rally and let's invite all these people and let's make this list of demands and then let's fundraise off of it. And then what?
Nothing.
That's
money.
The point.
Let's see how many more people we can convince that this cycle can continue.
That's the point. It's just a self thing. It's like what happens to NGOs when they start out with the best intentions. But the point you get to where you've got basically other interest holders, you exist to make your payroll more so than you exist to serve your mission. And you just basically become a cog in this machine. And
so many NGOs.
When the initial stage of the People's Party happened and everyone was there, including Dr. West, Chris Hedges, Nina, all of them, there was something there.
Yeah.
But as soon as I saw who was basically overseeing it, I said, this is going to fail. And it was just a question of when. And it happened, frankly, a lot sooner than I thought it would. Thought maybe they could have convinced somebody through an election cycle to at least try to run or maybe see if they could get anything out of it. But the truth is, the direction, the misdirection for so long of the movement has a lot to do with opportunism that doesn't see the long-term picture. And the long-term picture has to be this labor movement that we have to cultivate.
Yes. Led by the people and not by the personalities. No. We have got to start galvanizing around the policies. Do you guys remember? Because I do. When we had first started fighting, because Jen, even before you were running, the first I heard of you was when you were working for. Oh, you knew Zana. You knew my friend.
I knew Zana from Tim's campaign. That's
the first time Tim Canova's campaign. That's the first time I met you, like a long time ago, on a call for Tim Canova. Awesome. We were talking about organizing through his campaign for abolish ICE.
Yeah.
And against the DHS and the abolishment of the DHS and how we were going to message that, and teach people that these are new organizations written by the Patriot Act. At that time, we weren't focused on a face. It wasn't even Bernie's face. It was a policy. Now think about the Green New Deal before it became AOC's kind of face on it.
Right.
People were supporting it before that with all these candidates running across the country. You were one of them with the Green New Deal as their platform. It was getting national traction before she ever went to Pelosi's office. That helped to blow it up, but it was already getting speed. Medicare for all. Medicare for All, we didn't have one face to it. Brand new Congress and Justice Democrats. I organized the very first conference ever working with Nurses United and PNHP, which is the physicians unions, in order to start promoting Medicare for All. Well, the day I was in DC, and David Weigel was the only one that covered it, and Daniel Moran's from The Guardian, and David Weigel covered it. But we had a press conference with, I think, Ro Khanna back then, which Ro got issues with, and John Conyers, who had tried to get Medicare for All passed like for the last 2 decades, basically. Right. So we were doing a press conference, and I remember that day we went on the ground, and it was when they were having the vote to save the ACA vote. You guys remember that, with the up and down John McCain vote? Right. So we were protesting for Medicare for All out in front of the Capitol building, and people from MoveOn.org and from these other organizations were throwing spitballs at us, throwing stuff at us, telling us to get out of there, how we were going to destroy healthcare by standing up for Medicare for All. But people started getting behind it because it was a policy. So I feel like, and then once Bernie's face got slapped on Medicare for All, it kind of started to deflate a little bit instead of expanding, because everyone was pointing to him to get it done, and him alone.
Right. That's my point.
Sorry,
we need to be, but we can thank him for bringing it to because he definitely made it was such a foundation of his campaign that everybody who was behind him, whether or not that was their primary issue in the first place, they now are on that mission as well. Like, it definitely brought a lot of people into that mission. But I agree, this is a mission problem. This should not be a cult of personality. I don't care about your relational issues. And I think that, that's what we have to be focusing on for sure. And I'm willing to work with people on a per issue basis. If you and I agree on something, we can work together on that issue. That doesn't mean that I support everything you say and do. And one of the biggest problems I find on the left, the criticisms that I will get from people is, oh, you had so-and-so on your show, so you're an X, Y, and Z, like what you're saying. And it's like, these people really would prefer you just live in your little bubble and in your echo chamber. And I can't help but think that how unproductive that would be. And so
same people will tell you to work with the right wing in the Libertarian Party and to ignore racism.
So that I don't do, but I went on the Michael Knowles show. Okay. So I went on this show, and I'm still me, right? Like, I'm going to say what I'm going to say. It's not like I'm talking different to a different audience. How could me, being me, promoting whatever message I'm promoting, reaching new people, not be a good thing? Like, in what universe would that not be a good thing? You have to cross over with the same. It's different if you're a chameleon. Like, if you're, that's a whole different thing.
We've probably got anywhere from 500 to 1,000. I mean, listen, we're the Small But Mighty podcast that always seems to do good work. But, at 8,000 subscribers, I would say probably 500 to 1,000 of those subscribers are a direct result of Jen going on with Tim Pool. And even though a large portion of his audience obviously falls within that libertarian, even Mises Caucus type of mindset, of the 50, 60,000 live viewers, and there were 500,000 people. I remember it was a very big deal when she went on. And even if only 10% of that audience is like, I really like what Jen has to say, that is 5 to potentially 10,000 people who just heard a new message of, you know what, if the left was like Jen Perlman, I can get behind.
Well, and I think it's also in the delivery, and when you can connect with people, and I can connect with anybody, right? Like, I really can, because I'm not speaking. It's, if you're telling your truth and you're basing it on reason, it's amazing how that will resonate with people. And even if they don't agree with you, I have a lot of people. We have people in our chat that I know don't agree with me on issues, but they just like me. That actually is a thing.
Flip that all the way around to the other side of the spectrum. And one of the biggest supporters, and I mean the biggest supporters in the independent media space, is Vosh. I mean, he loves her and has.
And I get crap. I get crap because I've cross-pollinated with him, but I like him. This reminds me of junior high school. And it's like, even when I was in junior high school, I would be friends with who I wanted to. I didn't give a shit what anybody would say then. I feel even more so now. I'm going to affiliate with who I want to affiliate with. I'm still who I am. I can affiliate with somebody without absorbing their personality and all of their political beliefs.
I think that there's a difference between going on someone's show or supporting an initiative and promoting an initiative that is fundraising money for something bad. I keep going back to this war, this war rally. Yeah. I see people promoting it and say give money to this and stuff. That I don't agree with. I think those are two different things. Like, I have been on Fox News before, and I would go back because I'm not going to kiss their ass. If I went on Tucker Carlson, I would tell him exactly what I think. And I may not even let him lead the sorry, I saw someone talking about Asperger's in the chat, and I have that totally. I was like, I'm on the spectrum. I was diagnosed. Well, back then it was diagnosed as Asperger's, but now we don't use that term any longer. But I see that there's two different things. There's talking with people, and then there is hiding and obfuscating the negatives that they do in order to pander to an audience.
Correct.
I see both of those, because we were talking about Jimmy Dore earlier. I feel like Jimmy Dore purposefully obfuscates to pander to an audience. Now, I would go on Jimmy Dore's show and I'd confront him about things, but I'm not going, and I don't support him, but I would still go on there as long as I can be myself, and I wouldn't be. But if it's pre-recorded and I know it's someone who's disingenuous, and is going to slice up what I say, I may not. So there's a lot of nuance to this. I see
the thing.
And the worst part.
It's complicated, and you just have to, for me, I feel like at my age and my life experience, I trust my judgment, and I really don't care if other people do or don't. I know who I am. I know that where I go, I'm still that same person. I can talk about whatever you want to talk about. I don't absorb or endorse or anything of any one person just because I discuss with them or have them on my show. In fact, I think it's important to talk to people that I don't agree with.
The reason why most of it is all BS is because the best interview I ever saw on Fox News, bar none, was Chris Smalls with Tucker Carlson.
That was great.
That was the best thing I ever saw. And even though Tucker's intention was more or less to get him on to bash AOC for leaving the Amazon workers high and dry, by the end of the conversation, and knowing Chris, because Chris is as book smart as he is street smart. He may not look it to a lot of people, but he knows his shit inside and out. And by the time,
to me, he's got the drip, man. He's
awesome. He wasn't having Tucker shit.
By the time the conversation was over, he actually got Tucker to say, "Listen, I am not a supporter of unions, but I can definitely agree that labor needs more power in this country." And I'm like, my God, you got Tucker Carlson to say that labor needs more power. That is an A+++++.
And that whole audience that he reached, now I, of course, believe they'll never have him back after that.
They may not, but he made his impact. He did what he needed to do. Whereas Jimmy just wants to go on there and say, how many other suckers can I bring over to my side to become patrons, clicks, and all that?
It's a livelihood.
It is.
It's a livelihood.
And it's a good one.
But so
it's a very good one.
Well, to me, it's the same for the people that are those commentators as it is for the people in Congress. We need people to do this job without worrying about keeping this job.
Yeah.
I was about to say that, Jen.
You know what I mean? We need that mentality that people are doing it not for the purpose of keeping the job, whether that's a Congress job or a TV, a content creator job.
I can't remember anything that Jimmy ever said on Tucker Carlson's show, but I will always remember what Chris Smalls said and what Tucker said in response, and that is seared into my brain, and it should be seared into everybody else's brain. And that the same would be true if somebody was on Capitol Hill. Let's say somebody like Jen was there and said, we are going to have a floor vote on Medicare for all if it kills me. And I don't care how many of you are going to stand here with me. I don't care if it's you, Ro, if it's you, Alex, if it's you, Corey, if it's you, Rashida. I don't care if you're going to stand there with me. I'll do this by myself if I have to.
I love how he talks for me.
But my God, somebody's got to do this.
I just know that, well, I just know that until somebody takes the job without the need to keep the job, it's only when that happens that they can be effective in that job.
And without the care to keep the job. Because the funny thing is almost everyone who's in the House doesn't have the need to keep the job, or in the Senate. They were independently wealthy before they ever got their asses up there.
Right. It's more.
There's other motivations. When people say it's the money, I'm like, are you kidding me?
It's not the money. It's being part of it's being in the club. It's
the power.
It's the power and being, and that's the thing. And it's ironic, but the people we need are people that don't want power to have the positions of power. And it's true. And
one thing I remember very well about Wasserman Schultz when she was a main fixture within the party infrastructure, there was never a time where if the camera was calling that she wouldn't make an appearance on CNN, on MSNBC. And that's something as simple as, I'm going to have my close-up on national television. I can't wait to do that. And that's just one little thing in the grand scheme of things. Let's not forget how intoxicating it is to be on the Hill and be privy to inside information that people can't even begin to understand. People think that they have any idea just on the surface what these people trade inside information on. Kirsten Sinema probably has an account in the Caymans that is so fat at this point, it's about to explode. Like so
let's talk about the legislation thing.
Okay, so this will be where we close the conversation. So as we know, today was a big deal. And of course, there's a major loophole in the policy, but it's a start. You got to give credit where credit's due. Senator Josh Hawley, of course, has decided to bring a bill to the floor of the House that is called the Pelosi Act. And I think that is very appropriately named because the Democrats had every opportunity to actually get this thing up for a vote. Pelosi, of course, refused. She has been trading on inside information for probably decades.
She wouldn't even this is not something that she would have even considered.
Hawley introduces Pelosi Act banning lawmakers from trading stocks.
I love that
Josh Hawley has introduced a bill that will ban members of Congress from trading and owning stocks using the same legislation to take a jab at Representative Pelosi. Who gives a shit?
I love that it's called the Pelosi Act. I love that.
And I love watching the blue MAGA sycophants have to, basically say, "You're so rude." I'm like, no, Nancy Pelosi has looted the Treasury, as far as I'm concerned.
And she wonders why people break into her
house.
Hawley on Tuesday introduced the Pelosi Act seriously, to hell with it. Or the Preventing Elected Leaders from Owning Securities and Investments Act.
That's awesome.
Perfect name. Renew it. Credit to you, Hawley. And Josh Hawley is going to run for president. It's just a matter of when.
And I don't like him. No, I don't like him.
He's a spoiled rich kid. Who ended up getting?
Isn't he a Trumpy?
He was and a hedge fund and all that and blah 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 blah. Legislative push to curtail stock trading by lawmakers that has failed over the last few years. Members of Congress and their spouses shouldn't be using their position to get rich on the stock market. What a novel thought! The GOP senator previously introduced legislation last year seeking to ban lawmakers and their spouses from holding stocks or making new transactions while in office. The Hill has reached out to Pelosi's office for comment. Of course, there was none. Hawley, like a number of other Republicans, has focused on the former speaker and her family in pushing to ban stock trading by members of Congress. Last sold millions of dollars worth of shares of a computer chip maker as the House prepared to vote on a bill focused on domestic chip manufacturing. Spokesman for Pelosi said at the time that he sold the shares at a loss, which is a lot of interest in legislation barring stock trades after then Senator Richard Burr of North Carolina, who at the time was the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, unloaded stocks at the offset of the coronavirus pandemic. I believe Richard Burr ended up making about $5 or $6 million at the time on that sale. The SEC recently closed a probe on his trading activities without taking action. Shocking. Remember, you can screw working people. You can't screw the rich. If you screw the rich, you'll end up like Bernie Madoff.
Then you get in trouble.
Lawmakers have yet to be able to come up with a plan that garners enough support from both sides of the aisle to get a bill through Congress. Democrats in 2022 scraped a plan to vote on such legislation before the midterm elections, even after Pelosi reversed course and expressed openness to colleagues voting for stock.
When did she express open? I don't want to hear about expressing openness. That's not a thing.
Along with Hawley's bill, a bipartisan duo in the House has a bill this year on the topic. Representatives Abigail Spanberger, one of the biggest neoliberals in all of Democratic Party politics, and Chip Roy, as MAGA Republican as you can get, introduced the Trust in Congress Act this month, marking the third time the pair have introduced the legislation.
Yeah, but that doesn't have as good of an anagram as the Pelosi Act. I want the she wants look, she wants a federal building named after her. Oh, I would so much prefer to have a nice piece of legislation named after her. You know that, right? That she allocated X amount of money in the omnibus bill for her federal building in San Francisco. And it's called the Speaker Pelosi building. Did you know this?
No, that's gross. These people, I'm telling you. I love the name of the bill. The only thing that I do see one thing, and Republicans are so good at this. Keep an eye out for this, and keep an eye out for the other bills that it's going to be covering up.
Oh, yeah.
Because Democrats are great at it too. Don't get me wrong. Both parties are like legit good at this. They're so shitty. They'll like bring out some good bill and dangle it like, oh, we're saying to stop trading stocks, and then you look and they're doing something insane on the back end. So while they're doing this, and they've named it the Pelosi Act, which I love, and they're doing some of this theater because I don't think this will get passed, even though it damn well should.
Yeah.
I would also look at here's the shiny thing. What are they doing over here? And Democrats do it too. Don't get me wrong. They suck. But Republicans have a special skill at the beginning of the session of rolling out some bill with some kind of name like this that's really flashy, and then passing some really horrible piece of legislation underneath.
Oh, I don't think anything good will come. Yeah, nothing good will come of this. I don't think they're actually going to pass anything meaningful. And yes, I think they'll use every opportunity to pass things that are more intrusive and take away our rights, because that's what people do.
You had this guy, it doesn't matter what his name is. It just matters that he's one of those. Yeah, it's one of those Democratic, whatever you want to call them, the people that basically roam the streets of D.C. and they're just sycophants for the Democratic establishment. And so this person is like, the Republicans are worse at the stock trading. It's like, who gives a rat's ass who's worse? It shouldn't be allowed.
It's just, they're worse.
It's like, who gives a shit?
It's like junior high.
Mad.
I know Pelosi insider trades, but let me tell you about the Republicans who do it too.
They're worse.
Here's the bottom line. There is a clause in the bill that basically allows for blind trusts. If you're going to have that, then there is no point in having this bill. Get the blind trust clause out of the bill, which we all know they're not going to talk about, but we will, and status quo will, and hopefully others will too, that if you do not remove the blind trust clause within the bill, then there is no point in passing this, because that will be the loophole that will allow them to continue to do insider trading and put everything offshore. That's the goal. It always will be. Either you're going to stop the corruption or you're not.
Well, but look, kudos to the Republicans for capitalizing on the opportunity to make it look like they give a crap. And this is, it's theater. It's all theater. And it's the Democrats do it with their things too, where we know you don't actually mean that, but you're just saying that because it looks a certain way. It's all
what this tells us is even they know what's popular.
Yeah.
Anti-war is popular. Reining in corruption with Congress is popular.
But it won't make you rich.
Healthcare is popular among the workers. So they will pageantry the stuff that is important to us. So that gives me some confidence in some ways, because they've got the back end polling, they got the knowledge, and what we can say is we know the public is here. The public wants this to happen. We all know that. So then that takes it back full circles to what we were talking about before. How can we use this in part to help build the labor movement? Are there other ways, if they're not going to pass the legislation, are there other ways that we can prevent the insider trading? Can we push to pressure and do boycotts on companies that Congress are trading with until they stop trading with Congress?
If there
are there other creative ways to just tackle it? I mean, that's just one idea, because I feel like we're so honed in on this bill has to be passed at the federal level by Congress for us to do something. I feel like in a lot of the global South countries and a lot of the countries, like think about the Yellow Vest movement, for instance, they got things done in more creative ways.
Yeah.
So I feel like we have to start doing like economic boycotts. We got to make these people uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, I think none of them should get a moment of peace.
That's a cute Poochie.
Yeah. Look at that.
Oh.
I don't think they should get a moments of peace. I think when they're out in public, they think they should constantly be heckled. I think we should follow them into the bathrooms in public. I have no problem with any of that. And I do think we need to no, it's true. I think that if you're Brett Kavanaugh and you're out eating in public, you should not have that moment of peace in your life. And these are people that, whether it's appointed or elected, are there for the public good. And if you are not serving at the public good, then you should not be able to, you need to not hear the end of it. So I agree. I think, and what you're talking about is essentially doing it for corporations I agree totally. But, these people are so focused on, well, that's just not polite. And I'm like, we're so far past that. I'll tell Kirsten Sinema, I'll climb up on the toilet and look over the stall at your ass. Like, honestly, this is ridiculous. You don't deserve that, right?
I would like to try for 3 years, us turning all of our focus, not completely ignoring electoral politics, but let's say for 3 years, 2 to 3 years, we focus on ways to combat the corporations, because the corporations are the ones that are pulling the strings of Congress. So we're going to Congress, or we're going to the federal government, but we're not going the step above to the people who have all the money and that are pulling the strings and that are doing it. Instead of begging these people that we voted for that aren't going to do anything anyway. But I wonder, it's just throwing this out there for people to brainstorm. What are some ways that we can raise hell economically against these corporations? And part of that is labor movements. Part of that is disrupting the labor system by not showing up to work, by protesting, by building unions. What are some other economic boycotts that we could do? Someone mentioned the other day how not buying gas for 2 days because of the pandemic nearly crashed the market. So our gas prices went down $2 per gallon, just 2 days.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the economy is built on a house of cards. It doesn't have a foundation anymore. We do not make anything here anymore. Everything has been outsourced.
Weapons.
Yeah. We have a managerial class. We have a non-tangible economy that doesn't create things. We have stock traders and hedge funders and things that do not actually do anything. We do not manufacture in the United States, in states like Kentucky, West Virginia, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana the way that we used to, because it became far more lucrative to not pay workers a living wage, outsource to countries that pay a slave wage, and get rich.
Also, it transports the pollution to those places.
And in case anybody needs a reminder of who's responsible.
We know who's responsible. Well, we know one of the major responsible parties for this.
I just wanted to come on here and let everybody know that I got filthy, stinking rich as a result of NAFTA, normal trade relations with China.
We're familiar.
The crime bill obviously helped a lot. The Telecom Act of
those
96.
for-profit prison investments were really smart.
But the
AUMF, thank you for the AUMF, Bill Clinton.
It's my pleasure.
Love that.
The coup de grace, without question, was repealing Glass-Steagall and just flooding my pockets with all kinds of money. Listen, we came really close to getting Hillary in there. Could you imagine if she were president?
No, I can't. And no, that would not have been better.
If anybody needs a reminder of just how crappy this country is right now, you're looking at the reason.
Yeah, thank you.
I definitely had a lot to do with it. And some people still think that the Democratic Party actually represents workers. That's kind of amazing. Could you imagine a generation later and they still think we actually are there to help them?
No.
Oh, God.
You should be in prison.
There is no such thing as prison for the guy who made all the prisons.
I know.
possible.
Actually, this was my idea, Zana. This was my idea. So, I'm pretty anti-for-profit prison, but this is my willing to negotiate with corporatists. I'll give you for-profit prisons, but you have to get rid of all the nonviolent people and bring in all the big pharma and the Wall Street people. And if you put them and all those people in there, I'm actually okay with profiting on it. So I feel like I'm willing to throw the bone of having a for-profit prison industry as long as we're incarcerating the correct people.
Well,
I like this plan.
That's my compromise. Be capitalist on it.
Well, you're kind of making it sound like you actually want to help people that need help and take down the people that have been taken.
I just know that
advantage
I'd
of
rather
so long,
people like you be in prison, and I'd rather be surrounded with all of the nonviolent drug people and all the people that are in prison for crimes of poverty. I know that I would prefer them free and you incarcerated.
I just want everyone out there to understand that
that's my thoughts.
I am the person
Brilliant
who is all possible.
Right?
You will never, ever get anywhere.
That's my nod to capitalism, by the way.
And for every one of you out there who have voted for me over the years,
I did,
who have
unfortunately.
supported the Clintons and have supported neoliberalism here in America, who supported centrism, who supported Hillary over Bernie, who supported Joe over Bernie, thank you for being a bunch of suckers and making my life extremely easy. You couldn't have made it much easier, but I'll tell you, there's a reason why it's so simple. You know why? Because they did a poll not too long ago regarding different levels of the political spectrum in terms of trust in corporate media. Independents trust corporate media about 15%. Republicans trust it a little less than 20%. Democrats trust corporate media almost 80%.
Oh, is that real? That's a real poll.
Listen, there's a reason why people believe what I say. So
think about
really,
it. It makes sense, though. And we're still talking about a small percentage of people. Most people are not affiliated with the party. So you're already narrowing down that audience to begin with. But yes, it does make sense. And if you think about what the mainstream media is,
the only thing that matters is that they vote in the primaries, and
that's true. They vote in the primaries.
Yeah, you know, the sad truth is that liberals act like they care, but you know, there's an old saying, "Not in my backyard." Well, they like to act like they care, but when push comes to shove, they're just as pro-capitalist as any Republican you'll ever find.
They're also the ones calling the police at the dog park when they see
absolutely. Well, hey, listen, that's the beauty of the crime bill. We put a cop on every corner, and every Tom, Dick, and Harry that lives in the suburbs now feels safe at night.
Yeah, that's how we
feel. Of course, everyone else has to pay a
price. Did you hear Biden said that was a success, that the crime bill actually helped people?
Yeah,
let's be honest. Joe doesn't.
It helped a lot of people make a lot of profit on a couple generations of Black people. That's what.
But the truth is, Joe doesn't know his, one side from the other at this point. He'll just say whatever he thinks will make him sound good. It's not like there's much to it anymore. But I just wanted to come on and remind everybody: don't ever forget why you're in the situation you are today. And as I sit back on my palatial mansion and all the wonderful things I've done in my life, including all the wonderful conquests I've had and the books I've written, the speeches I've gave, and
all right, wrap it
the
up.
People who just keep believing what I'm saying is great.
Your gold-plated saxophones.
I've also been to some pretty noted islands and was able to get away with never being caught there. So remember, I did not actually have anything to do with the disappearance of anybody. I'll see you guys later. Bye.
Yeah.
So there you go. He's probably my best.
He's so lechy. He's so
good. You guys have some big names that drop in for cameos.
Right? I know.
We got others, but we'll only get two today.
Yeah.
Z, how can people find your work? Anything that you're doing if they want to?
Yeah. What is your job? I'm like, what are you? Are you doing a regular segment? Like, how is that working with you with Status Quo?
Should be on at random times, but Mondays and Tuesdays, I'll mostly be co-hosting with Jordan. On those days, be doing some Substack articles too. I also have Bullhorn Bulletin news on Substack. That's my personal channel. I haven't done, and also on YouTube, haven't done as much stuff there because I have been starting at Status Quo and winding down from the holidays, but I will be doing a relaunch with Bullhorn Bulletin news pretty soon. And that's just going to be kind of a side project, but with Status Quo, you can find me on there on Mondays and Tuesdays at 5 p.m. We have on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. the amazing Kim Brown from Black Power Media. She is a badass.
I dig her. I actually, the first clip I saw that Jordan had posted of her, I texted him. I was in the middle of the clip and I texted him like, I like this girl. She's great. Like I was like, yeah, for sure.
And she covers issues of, women of color, domestic violence. She'll cover police violence. So a lot of the social and economic issues that are often not talked about. We have the amazing and wonderful badass Tina Desiree Berg. She was just on the ground. We've done a lot of coverage on Stop Cop City. We were on the ground for the protest this weekend. Tina was running toward the fire instead of away from it. Pretty wild stuff. So we have several videos on Status Coup's YouTube channel, STATUSCOUP. You guys can check that out. We also have Steve Grumbine on Fridays and occasionally on Sundays. And Steve is amazing. He can teach you about MMT, and he's an economics guru, and he's all around just a smart dude. We also have Ron Placone. And Ron Placone, you guys go check out, look him up online because he actually has a live stand-up this weekend. I think he's showing a documentary that he's doing.
Very cool.
Some folks might want to go to that. But I had to give everyone a shout out because I love them, and also Colin on the back end, I love you too. But that's our lineup for Status Quo, and I'm just working on the background, helping promote them. And this weekend, as you had mentioned, we do have several people coming on from Olamia Lauren. I love her so much. And then we have Chris Small, Stephen Donziger, Nina Turner, several people coming on this weekend. So come check that out and
support journalism.
Thank you guys so much. And like, subscribe to Generational Change, because they are always doing actions organizing, talking about important things, and bringing people on that are often not talked to.
We try. We wish we had a bigger platform. You know what I mean? Like the people we bring on, it's amazing to me that more, well, you know this, and Jordan knows this. It's frustrating because there's so many important stories, and there's so not the big platforms that don't do anything. And it's very frustrating. So we scream as loud as we can, but we are small.
But mighty.
Small but mighty. That's what I say. We're small
but mighty. Either they're covering what's happening in the mainstream news, or it's in the left spaces. They're just arguing about each other.
Yeah.
Arguing about each other.
And we're trying to circumvent all of that. We're trying to actually, that's what I find too, that the left just sits there and talks about other content
listen,
creators.
We're not going to name them, but there is a content creator that basically their whole shtick is basically just to talk about others, and it's kind of where it's
like talk soup.
It's running its course.
They're like the talk soup. They're the talk soup of the left independent media.
Yeah, eventually, eventually the gossip is going to come back to you, and eventually going to piss off too many people, and that will ultimately be the end of it. What we're trying to do is obviously make the real change, as are you.
Thank you,
very
Zana.
grateful for you coming on, Z, and of course,
I had so much fun talking.
Yeah. Same here, my friend. Good to see you.
Bye, Zana.
Bye, guys.
Always,
Eric, we have looked at Rumble. We haven't subscribed or committed to it, but we have looked at that, and I'm also investigating doing a Substack.
Yes.
I think a Substack would be good for us.
Yeah, that could probably help. I would say that could help.
And because for me, in some cases, it's a lot easier for me to come up with like more written content as well.
Well, as we all know, the conversation with Zana could go on for hours and hours. It did. This show went a lot longer than one would have expected, but certainly was worth it.
And I'm hungry.
Hope you guys, obviously I am.
You're always hungry, but I'm hungry and I need to go in and eat now.
On Monday night,
we will now be
going to have one of the, there's not a lot of good you can say about Florida politics.
This is
but
good.
We'll have one of the two best that we have in Tallahassee. As you know, in the State House, you have Ann Eskamani, and in the State Senate, you have Chevron Jones. He will be joining us on Monday evening to talk about the latest ridiculous incarnation of Governor DeSantis and his warpath towards the White House.
And there's a lawsuit that's impending. Ben Crump is the attorney. I know that there are several parties involved in bringing this lawsuit. And essentially what it comes down to is that the state legislature is wanting to eliminate or not offer the AP African American history class.
It's an elective.
It's an AP course.
You don't have to take it.
And not just that. Okay, and let's talk about that for a second. And we will get into this with Chevron. Why is it not required? Not AP, but like everything else, everything has levels. You could have that history, not at the AP level. You should be asking yourselves, why isn't that a course that everybody has to take? Because it should be. And why is it that only certain students who qualify to take an AP course, which by the way is a pretty small segment of the population to begin with, and have to be a certain type of student to take that? So why are those the only students that should have access to that course?
This is a guy who truly believes he's going to be the next president, and I would probably say it's likely at this point.
It is likely, but I'm not.
However,
this is not working.
However, he is very likely going to enter the presidential race in the next 3 to 4 months. And if he does, I highly doubt that this is a fight he's going to want, because it's not going to help him in the long run.
No, and that's why he has, look, he's been noticeably silent on the abortion issue. He definitely keeps putting it off to the back burner as much as possible. He knows that this is definitely not a hill he wants to die on. But this thing about how we're approaching teaching history is of extreme importance to me. Across all different issues.
And the greatest concern right now, and why the Democratic Party, which has been resisting the change from the populist left for as long as, well, not just Bernie, but Bernie really accelerated it. Ever since Occupy Wall Street, it's been a long time coming. But we all know that the next 2 seats up on the Supreme Court are going to be Alito and Thomas. And I can assure you that it'll be very similar to the Ruth Bader Ginsburg situation. Unless they're out in a body bag, they are going to sit there until a GOP president is there, and then they will step down and be replaced by somebody 30 years younger than they are. And that's how this works. So as far as I'm concerned, the cycle will repeat. As Zana said, we have to start from the ground up. We have to be focused on local and state. And what we will talk about with Chevron is how we can start really building that infrastructure.
I need to help with that. I find the education thing huge. Hi, Jason. It's so funny. I was just thinking about you today. I was just looking at a post you just made on Instagram, and I was thinking, oh, he's sitting in traffic at the border. That looks fun. Anyway, so yeah, I think these are important issues. I very much am obviously very unabashedly pro First Amendment. I have a lot of issues with a lot of the censorship that's going on. But this idea of not properly teaching history, and this is something that I think that has been one of my biggest motivators doing this show for the past 2 years, is whether it comes to how we're dealing with deconstructing Zionism on this show, or how we've taught about things like when it was the anniversary of the Tulsa massacre, and we talked about that. I find it very important to teach people things that I recently learned and didn't know, because I really feel like, and I grew up in a very good public school system down here in Florida. I grew up around educated people. I grew up around smart people. And so when I come across an entire topic or an entire group of people that we weren't exposed to or taught about, it's safe to assume that a lot of people weren't exposed to it as well. So that's all. It's not from well, if I didn't know, nobody knows. But I have enough in academia where I kind of feel like, yeah, kind of.
I agree. I think that these are, and of course, my attitude regarding this particular topic, the AP, African American studies that is being banned in school, it's just a distraction. It's just another distraction, not to deal with the fact that people can't afford to live in the state of Florida.
But yet it's still subjugating people, and it's an important distraction. I want people to learn African American history. Actually, can we just stop saying, the only reason, by the way, that has to be a thing is because they were erased from our actual history in this country. So now it has to be a thing. See, it didn't have to be a thing. It could have always just been history.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I never learned about Black Wall Street in Oklahoma or Tulsa, Oklahoma.
By the way, there were multiple Black Wall Streets. That wasn't just, that was one.
That was one that got burnt down.
No. They all got destroyed.
Oh, they did.
All of them got destroyed. Tulsa was the main one that we heard of, but there were a handful of others around that same time.
I didn't find that out until like a few years ago.
Well, right.
And I went to public school, but I didn't, that was never talked about. And these are things that are important because, again, the subjugation of working people, also used through a divide and conquer strategy based on race, creed, sexual orientation, and so forth, is how you keep people divided.
And it's funny, they're fighting about whether or not to have an AP course in African American history. They're fighting about this. Well, one of the big things, and DeSantis got on and bitched about this, was the idea of the intersectionality issue and about teaching about queer Black. I don't know exactly what the phrase was, how it was, and Chevron will talk more about this. But yes, there's an intersectionality issue. There's a reason why Black transgender women are the most violently attacked and vulnerable people. So you can't take those things, whatever.
And that also seeps into the very deep-rooted conversation about the blindness of religion within a number of communities, and that's another problem because a lot of people live in the shadows. They do.
And well, yeah.
You know, when Gillum went through what he went through, that was a perfect opportunity to really have that honest conversation. But it did, you know.
Well, look, Chevron is going to come on. He's going to talk about it. I saw his. If you guys haven't seen his interview on Democracy Now!, it was great.
With Amy Goodman.
With Amy Goodman, and it was also, and I cannot remember the man's first name. Gallon is his last name, who's on the Miami-Dade School Board, who's also part of this lawsuit. But yeah, the idea that there's people fighting to keep people from getting accurate information is infuriating to me. You might not like the subject matter. I appreciate that. You might not like it. I don't like a lot of things. I don't like geometry. But like, you know, other people should still have the ability to learn it again. But then again, I think Howard Zinn People's History should be required reading for high schoolers. And I think that our whole approach to teaching history is completely warped.
Well, this will definitely be a topic of conversation that will be very relevant on Monday. It is not going away. Maybe not. You might see us on Status Quo over the weekend during their marathon.
I don't know. I wasn't invited. That's all I'm saying.
We'll see what Jordan has to say.
I wasn't invited, Jordan.
In the meantime, we appreciate your support. Remember to smash that like button. If you are so inclined, as we so often ask that you are, go to patreon.com/generational change. For as little as $5 a month, you can become a wonderful supporter of this great show. That includes you, Thomas R. And if you are feeling a little extra generous, for $10 a month, you can get the Lulu sticker and the Mansion Parliamentarian 2024 bumper sticker, because we all know the most likely person to become president is going to be this team.
It is. Well, look, that is the most powerful. Those are the most powerful people in the Democratic Party. They've stopped all things from happening. I mean, our president couldn't get a $15 minimum wage because of the parliamentarian. That's pretty huge.
But if you are not feeling the love of giving your credit card information,
I do say down with math.
But if you are feeling super, super generous, the Tri-Blend
Guys,
baseball
it's just a jersey.
It's really, but I say Tri-Blend because it's really that comfortable.
It is a soft jersey.
$25 a month will get you the wonderful shirt. Your support means a lot. But if you are so inclined to contribute, but really don't want to put your credit card on record, you could go to Cash App. And at Cash App, you can put in $GenChange and pitch in to our show. Lord knows we would be extremely appreciative of that contribution.
We're very appreciative.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. We haven't had as many guests tonight. Maybe it's because of,
I never know why.
Yeah.
I never know why.
I can't really say which one night or the other does better, but obviously thank you to Jordan and Status Quo for their contribution to the show.
Absolutely.
For anybody who pitches in, we are obviously very appreciative. Any and all matters. That to me really says a lot. As I say, we are a small but mighty show, but we are obviously very appreciative of each and every one of you that are here. Thank you so much. Smash that like button, subscribe, do all those wonderful things. We'll see you Monday.